Thank you for watching our video. Please give us a big like, subscribe to our channel for new videos every day with amazing cars. Leave us your opinion in the comment section on the video. Thank you. At the time I bought the Ferrari, I already owned a Porsche Cayenne. I still own it, since I wouldn't be able to function without it. As you know, the Cayenne is a powerful and large SUV, and I have a family. We live in a place with lots of snow, so I really need it. I have always been happy with the Cayenne. In addition to being a high-quality vehicle, the Cayenne is also classy. And you know how superficial people can be, so if you drive Cayenne, they look at you with certain kind of respect, they take you seriously, and of course, they spice it all with envy. Now, the real question is, if I was so happy with the Cayenne, why the hell did I buy the Ferrari in the first place? Well, to find out, go to the next page. Dreaming a little dream. Most guys have this dream about some car. Even people who don't consider themselves car lovers can name at least one car they see as a dream car. Over the years, I have loved several different cars, but Ferrari has always been my true dream car. Of course, not just any Ferrari. Maybe you will be surprised when I tell you that I've never dreamed about the newest or the most expensive Ferrari. It didn't have to be new. Truth be told, most used Ferraris look like they just left the factory. You can get a Ferrari with the mileage of only 30,000, even if it is 10 years old, or older. These things don't go out of style, and they don't really age. Anyway, the car I was in love with was Ferrari F430 Spider. I used to spend time online looking at used F430s, thinking, calculating, planning or simply feeling pathetic. I was aware that I was not a billionaire, and I was well aware of the fact that I didn't really need this car. That, however, never changed my ambition. Whenever I heard that sound in the traffic, I could tell it was a Ferrari, before even turning my head to look at it. Whenever I would see one, I had to stop and take a good look. The transparent engine compartment, fantastic sound, 4300 cc and 490 horsepower, fantastic interior. As I said, I own a Cayenne, and I am happy with it. Also, I am not a billionaire. However, I was ready to give up many things, almost all things, just so I could buy a F430 Spider. Yeah, it does sound completely irrational, but it's not. Keep reading, and you will soon understand what I'm saying. As I said before, I managed to find some sense in this whole Ferrari thing. 1. It is an investment. You buy it, take good care of it, and someday, if you have to, you can sell it for a good price. You can also rent it out. Yeah, that sounds like a lot of hassle, and most Ferrari owners would hate to let other folks drive their cars. I am just saying it's an option. 2. Your kids can inherit it, and by that time, it will be a classic, which will only increase its value. 3. I don't go on vacations, I work a lot, and live in a rather passive and quiet place, with not much fun going on. So, I thought, if I have this one thing that I can really enjoy, I will feel less bored, sometimes even depressed, in this environment. I thought to myself, I will enjoy it the same way people enjoy their normal hobbies. Now, I had to think about parking. You see, I live in an expensive but small country. We lack space, especially parking space. We live in a building where we own only one parking space, and it is impossible to rent another. I had an option to keep the Ferrari in the garage, and the Cayenne outside, in front of the garage. However, I love my Cayenne and I did not have the heart to let it freeze outside. I intend to use it for a long time, and when the time comes to sell it, I want it to be in good condition. So, I had to find a parking space for the Cayenne. It was hard to find a good parking space that wasn't too far from our building. But hey, when you're crazy in love, there is no such thing as impossible. Speaking of impossible, I also had to talk to my family and explain that this purchase made perfect sense. And then it started. Excitement and hormonal madness. I found a great Ferrari F430 Spider, just the one that I've always dreamed of. and I got a great deal on it. The car is in perfect condition, looks amazing, sounds amazing, and simply is amazing. The night before I went to the shop to buy it, I couldn't sleep. I had to take some Valium to calm down and get to sleep, but Valium didn't do anything. I managed to sleep 1 hour maybe, and I had a nightmare. In my dream, the car I wanted was sold, but they offered me a very similar Ferrari. When I saw it, it was in terrible condition, falling apart. The guy in my dream said, "We will give you a great price for it." I woke up struggling for breath. That morning, I was so exhausted that I could barely walk. However, nothing could stop me. I went to the bank to make sure that everything was ready, and then ran off to the shop. I barely had the energy to say hello to the sales guy. All the energy I had was suddenly consumed by the feeling that came over me when I saw the car. Of course it sounds crazy. It is crazy. But that was nothing compared to the madness I went through the day after. That was the day when the car was delivered to me. I could not wait. I couldn't sleep, even though I was freaking tired. I had to have sex, and then I had to masturbate several more times, just to stop the hormonal madness that was going on in my system. After all, that's the good old trick, right? To reduce the stress and relieve the tension, have sex. Well, I needed more than that. I was high on dopamine, serotonin and adrenaline. And once again, Valium did not help one little bit. It is hard to explain. But the story has just started. Go to the next page. My car is here. And I am dizzy. Somebody bring me the sidewalk. As I said, sleep deprivation took its toll, and I was so goddamn exhausted and dizzy. But when the guy drove the car to a parking spot near my place, I simply had to drive it, straight away. Suddenly, I was not seeing double, I was not sick, I could actually speak and say thanks to the guy. I have been driving maybe for about an hour, but I had no sense of time. I was listening to the sound of the engine, and I was in heaven. Then we came home and SHT. I can't keep it in the living room. So, I started being a little crazy. Just the thought of the guy who parks next to my car, scratching the Ferrari was driving me insane. He did it to the Cayenne a couple of times. Of course, I paid for the paint job. He stopped scratching my Porsche, and I stopped thinking about it. But now I started thinking about it all over again. It was a nightmare to think about it. The problem is not paying for the paint job. The problem is an asshole who probably parks his car using his foot instead of his hand on the steering wheel. So, even though I was dead tired, I couldn't sleep, remember? I started running around, trying to neighbor-proof my parking space. I had to do it before the car was delivered. I decided to buy one of those posts you simply attach to the ground, you lift them to create a barrier, and put them down when you need to drive out. However, the only shop nearby was out, WTF. So I had to wait for a week. That was hell. I spent that week going to the garage several times a day, just to make sure the car was unscratched. Then it hit me, I can protect the spider from the neighbor, but I can't protect it from every single driver in the world. There will always be a possibility of someone scratching it, accidentally or on purpose, or smashing it, and I can't do anything to prevent that. And so, will I ever sleep? I have owned it for several days, and I was so exhausted from all the stress, sleep deprivation, and worry. However, every time I started the engine, all the stress would vanish. The sound was so fantastic that I tried to stop listening to my own thoughts, just so they don't interfere with the sound from heaven. But my exhaustion was getting worse day by day, and despite of all the sex, masturbation, Valium and wine, I could not get to sleep. I was so full of goddamn serotonin, the happiness hormone. But, enough with that. This is where it starts being interesting. Everyone loves you more than ever. Like, the folks that hated you for owning a Cayenne, now love you. You know what I mean. They hate you even more, but they look like they love you more than they love their own children. They say hi and smile, and you have no idea who they are. They also don't know who you are, but they know you have a Ferrari. I was never too social, but I have a few friends, and that is enough for me. People wanted to hang out with me before the Ferrari, for various reasons, some of which were acceptable and logical. But now, everyone is trying to get closer, and that is seriously annoying. The assholes of this world are now being even bigger assholes, showing their true lying faces. If anything annoys me, it is a fake smile and hypocrisy. I don't like superficial people. I know, it sounds contradictory. I mean, you could easily call me superficial for falling in love with a car, say it, it's okay. And they stare. Boy, they stare. Everyone, people passing by, other drivers, traffic cops, they all stare. When the car is parked, they sometimes stop to take photos and just look at it. I smile at those folks, because I understand them. I went through that, too. However, some people stare like they hate my guts, and they don't even see me well enough because they are staring at the car. To be honest, people stared at me before. I am a good-looking young woman. I am used to people looking at me, but this is a bit too much for my taste. So, apart from everything I said before, what did Ferrari do to my life? To tell you the truth, crazy, crazy stuff. It made me feel, and occasionally act, like a crazy person. I was obsessed, not only with buying it, but also with keeping it safe and sound. See? Madness. It made me worried, exhausted, a bit disappointed in myself. How could I allow myself to fall for it this way? It consumed a lot of our money. And no one knows what the future brings. Therefore, more worry and a touch of guilty conscience. I got a really good deal, and I did not spend too much money on it, although I can't say it wasn't expensive. And speaking of money, suddenly, everyone is trying to borrow money from me. And I keep trying to explain a very simple thing: how the hell can I lend them money? How can anyone expect me to have any money left? I just bought a freaking Ferrari. I could easily ask them to lend me some money, but I think that would seem a bit arrogant. Anyway, owning a Ferrari also had, and still has, some great effects on my life. I am talking about things like these. It helps you see people clearly. It is now easy to tell who wants to hang out with you just to feel classy and be seen in a Ferrari. It also helps you with your old friends. It helps you see if they are really happy for you, or they suddenly envy you. It also shows how much your family loves you. They must love you, if they were able to put up with all the Ferrari madness, and the fact that you spent all that money on a car. And then you start explaining to them that it is not just a car. It is a Ferrari F430 Spider, with 490 horsepower, supernatural performance. You know, made in heaven. Thank you for watching our video. Please give us a big like, subscribe to our channel for new videos every day with amazing cars. Leave us your opinion in the comment section on the video. Thank you.